Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Manon Bolliger, a retired and deregistered naturopathic physician with 30 plus years of experience. Here you will discover engaging and informative conversations between experienced healers, covering all aspects of healing, the personal journey, the journey of the practitioner, and the amazing possibilities for our own body and spirit.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Lisa Sack, and she's a certified yoga therapist, Āyurvedic health counselor, and has done, continue to do extra certifications and accreditations. And I guess the most important thing is she is passionate about what she does. So welcome to the podcast. And I guess my first question to you is, how did you get into, let's call it the healing arts? Because sometimes what we choose to do comes secondary, but we first get interested in the whole field of healing.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a long story. I'll try to shorten it as much as I can. There was a period in my life, I'm 64 years old now, and there was a period of my life in my mid 30s into my 40s where I just was very discontented. And that showed up in many, many ways. So there was discontentment in my work. At the time, I was doing work that I really wasn't passionate about. I had been in the theater for many years and I had loved that work, but for various reasons, my dad had passed away and the theater life seemed a bit frivolous after he passed. And so I got married. I had children late. I had them when I was 38 and 40. And so I was working in a job doing medical marketing, and it had no purpose. It had no passion to it. And I just found that I was irritated and angry a lot of the time. And I wanted very, very desperately to be more compassionate, but I just had no idea how to go about doing that. And then this is 2022 now. So yeah, so it's about 20 something years ago. A yoga studio opened just a couple of blocks away from me. And I had been interested in yoga in my 20s. In fact, I'd been really drawn to it and was about to go on a retreat in my early 30s. And then for various reasons, it didn't work out. And instead I met my husband. So there's a bit of fate perhaps stepping in there. I didn't get that thing, but I got something else that really fed my soul. And so I started going to yoga classes. And, at the time I was as inflexible in my body as I was in my personality. And just the doing of the postures, because I think as for many people, I was drawn into yoga from the aspect of the movement part of it. But as I began to do the practice, I noticed that I was changing. I was literally getting more flexible in my body, but I seemed to be getting more flexible in my outlook as well. And then in, I guess about 2011, my mother had a stroke, a major stroke, and I was in a near fatal car accident. And those two things combined just stopped me dead in my tracks. And I think, as happens for many people when we have a brush with death, or we have a brush with the loss of someone very near to us, it wakes us up and shakes us up a little bit and makes us say, what are you doing? What are you doing here? What are you doing with your life? What's important to you? If you only had a day or two or a couple of months to live, what do you want to be doing? And so I turned to yoga to help me in my physical recovery. And at that time, a teacher asked me to participate in a training, and I at first I really dismissed it because I thought, I'm not going to teach. This is not who I am. But she was somewhat persistent, and I realized that I was already attributing certain changes that I was making in my life to my practice. So I decided to dive in. And that's really what got me started when I began to study yoga, and truly study it. And I mean, beyond the physical postures. Now we're talking about the philosophy behind it, the breath practices that accompany it, the chanting, the making of sound. I just began to realize that it was a system for transformation, really, on every possible level. And all that mattered was that one be willing to invest in it. And so at that point, I really never looked back. I did a 200-hour training. And then I heard about a teacher who was a yoga therapist who had a brain tumor. And there was an article about him that described how he used therapeutic yoga to recover from his brain cancer. And I thought, I've got to study with him. As the saying often goes, right? When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so for me at that time, he was definitely, his name was Gary Craftso, and he was quite the right teacher for me, because he taught me that yoga as a practice was something that really should be adapted to each individual person. And the kind of the model that we have here in the United States of doing group classes is really not the way yoga was necessarily intended to be taught, especially not to adults. And so I became a yoga therapist and started working with clients and teaching them the tools of yoga. And as part of our yoga therapy training, we were exposed a little bit to Ayurveda, which is the sister science to yoga. Ayurveda really, some people say that yoga picks up where Ayurveda leaves off, because Ayurveda is very much focused on diet and lifestyle changes. And there's a very famous teacher who likes to say it's hard to reach enlightenment when you have anemia. So the idea is that you need a robust physical presence. You need a body that where you're not consumed by pain or by physiologic discomfort in order to pursue the more subtle spiritual disciplines. And so I began to study Ayurveda, and it quickly became clear to me that I was really in my head. I had a very intellectual approach to a lot of what I was doing. And so as I studied Ayurveda, that led me to doing somatic work, which I know is a particular interest of yours as well, in terms of the Bowen technique. And as I began to study somatic work, that just opened a whole new realm for me, and showed me the possibility of really, we can enter and move towards this spiritual awareness through our bodies, through our emotions, through our minds. And really, you have to find the kind of practice that suits the person in front of you. So that's why I kind of wear many different hats as a healer, because it seems to me that until you really sit with a person and know what they're about, it's hard to know what is going to be the thing that is going to spark them into beginning to make transformations. So that's, I guess, that's sort of how I got where I was going. And, in that time, as I've gotten older, I've watched my own practice change. I've watched what's important to me change, so whereas 15 years ago, I would have said to you, I would never sacrifice my physical asana practice. Now, I don't do much asana. I do somatic movement, which is designed to keep my fascia nicely hydrated and everything moving and all the channels open. But it's my meditation practice that is the most important part of what I do, because I think that's what's really created change for me. And the more I've been able to change, the more I think I'm better able to really be with the person in front of me, having had the experience of change.
Well, that's a very interesting life story. But so it caught me when you said the flexibility was changed. Your mental flexibility was changed with yoga, which at that moment I interpreted as physical movement yoga, which that was the case, right?
Yes, at the time. And it was when I started to do meditation that I began to see the rigidity as it played out in my psychology.
Got it. Okay.
And then what I needed to do to learn to be less rigid here.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. So it's like it's one led to the other, but then was affirmed by the continuation of your practice.
Yeah. I mean, I know you know this, and I think a lot of people are beginning to realize it, but I don't think it makes much sense to make distinctions between body, mind, and spirit. And that's part of the reason I love Ayurveda so much, because Ayurveda sees us as a whole, and it encompasses all of those dimensions, because we don't exist as only one thing. We're all of those things together. And the key is to figure out the way in, which could be through the body. It could be through digestion. It could be through the mind. It really depends on the individual. Yeah.
No, I think it's similar to the way when I was in practice, I felt like there's many doors into the healing process. And it's like, as a naturopath, I had different modalities. I have favorite ones, as we all identify more with one than another. For me, it was Bowen therapy and homeopathy. But it depends where the person is at, because you cannot start with something that doesn't resonate.
No, it's not about you as the teacher or the coach. It's only about the person in front of you. And that, I think, that's the real job of, you want to call it a coach or a therapist or a teacher, is to see into what it is about that person in front of you that lights them up. Because if you can find the thing that lights them up, that can be the path to change. I mean, I'll give you a small example. I was working with a client who had expressed a particular interest in Jyotish. Jyotish is Vedic astrology, where, there's looking at the planets and the influence of the planets on us. And, he had an interest, but he'd never really done anything with it. And when I was working with him, yes, there were things going on for him physically, but I said, I'm going to recommend for you that you find a way to begin to study Jyotish. And that lit him up and became the thing that he was like, it changed him because it came from him. It wasn't, I didn't go into the interview thinking, oh, I know what's right for you. This is the way we're going to work because this is what I know works for people. It was about him. And that's, always, I think, what we have to try to do as healers is to, Ayurveda teaches that we all have the wisdom within us to heal. It's just that sometimes we forget it. So if we can help somebody remember and tap into that wisdom, the work it's not done, but it's moving in in the direction we want it to go.
Yeah. That is working with the healing force, but you have to remind yourself that it's there.
Exactly. That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, true. So what, I'm trying to think, I'm imagining quite a few people know about yoga and Ayurveda. So rather than go into depth about that, maybe share a couple of real examples, no names, obviously, or whatever, of something that surprised you in consulting with somebody and realizing that this was one door in, and then what actually transformed, just so that it's very concrete and wider. Because what I've noticed with many therapists is they define themselves by their modality, which is kind of normal in the sense of you display what you know.
Right.
And then you think that people are going to come and go, I want that, which is why I'll see you.
Right.
But actually the transaction is quite different. If you could just say, I am a referral base and some of the stuff I can refer to myself, you would approach the world very differently, right? So sometimes when people come in, you're the perfect fit. You're absolutely what they want, and they may not realize it, because they may not even know what yoga, or they've heard about it vaguely or whatever. So what I'm looking for is like, yeah, an example of something that surprised you, or really, yeah, comes out of the, it could be your ordinary, because it might be happening all the time.
Yeah, I think, to tell you the truth, I have a sense that things are moving in the direction that they should when there is that moment of surprise, when something happens that you didn't anticipate, and suddenly either the client is revealing something to you that they haven't they're heretofore revealed,
Yeah.
or things just go in a decidedly different direction from where you thought they might go. So I'll give you a couple of examples, that the ones that spring to mind right away. So, there are a lot of people who definitely come to me specifically for somatic movement work because they have pain. They're very motivated, and they want to get out of pain, and they want to resume everything that they were originally doing. They want their lives to go back to what they were before. And I had a client recently who, that's how we started, which was, she said, I want to be able to do this, 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 and this. And she struck me as being a particular way, from the Ayurvedic terminology, we would say that she had a lot of fiery personality in her. And people who have a lot of fire tend to be very ambitious and very driven. And sometimes they can be perfectionists, and they really have a way that they think that things should go. And the moment we got down on the floor together, what was really striking was her breath. And the way that her breath was caged is, I think, the way that I would put it. And just from listening to her talk and from what she described, I didn't anticipate that. I thought, yeah, she seems to have really good, sort of awareness. And I thought, fine, we're probably going to sail through some things here. But we wound up spending probably the bulk of that first practice just helping her to begin to sense how she was holding in her rib cage. And within the first week and a half, she said, I don't know what we did, but so much has changed.
Manon Bolliger here, and I want to thank you for taking actionable steps towards engaging your healing journey and helping others discover their path by watching, sharing, subscribing, and reviewing these podcasts. Every review and share helps spread the word, these different perspectives and choices and options for healing. And to thank you, I'd like to invite you to sign up to my free 7-sequence email tips on health and healing for everyday life. You can go to healerscafe.com tips. Thanks so much.
And of course, in retrospect, I can look back at it and say, oh, yes, of course, because as you let go of some of that holding here and allowed for more spaciousness, suddenly aspects of healing where it's like, I guess I would use a metaphor. It's almost like, that's a constricted space and nothing can get in. And then when you open that space, all sorts of things can come in and things can release. And then a couple of weeks later, she talked to me about her fears about sort of becoming like her mother, who was very restricted physically. And, then you begin to realize, oh, of course, I know this intellectually, but here I am, I'm seeing it right in front of me, is the connection in that person's body with this fear, this emotion that has inhabited them, this idea that has taken hold. And watching them release that, I kind of want to cry right now because it's really so beautiful when it happens. And it's, I think, the times when I feel like, going back to your question about what surprises me, I'm always a little bit surprised when I feel like the teachings are just coming through me without my directing them. It's really what I want all the time, actually, is just to be in that place where I'm with that person in front of me and the teachings come through. It doesn't always happen. It usually it happens at some point, but when it's really there, it's like nothing else. It's like nothing else. I think another example I would say is I had a client who came in originally because she was thinking she was wanting to get pregnant, and she had some long sort of term issues with a kind of difficult relationship to food, which a lot of people have, based on what's happened in their childhood. And I was really wowed by how true the teachings, for example, of Ayurveda are in that case, which describes how, when you have somebody who has a lot of airy quality in them, whether it's because they moved a lot as a child or they had an unstable childhood or whatever, that has a profound effect on someone's ability to feel grounded. And so while she came in talking about very specific things that she wanted to work on, what became really instantly clear was this need to help her feel safe and secure and able to let go of a kind of hypervigilance that she had cultivated all her life from this just constant moving and not having security in her family. And so, again, it's another situation where I would not have looked at it and said, oh, that's, that's where we're going to be going. But it revealed itself.
Right.
And I think that really for all of us, if we do a careful intake and we stay open and absolutely without judgment and ask questions and just encourage the person in front of us, that a lot of things will be revealed. I mean, that's really considered to be the heart of Ayurvedic counseling, which is that you listen completely without judgment. And I think then, again, I'm going back to your question about being surprised. I'm always surprised when it happens, which is that just being listened to, just feeling seen and heard has a tremendous impact on someone's well-being. And people will say that to me time and again after sessions. They'll just say, I feel better. Yeah. And they feel better because they were listened to. Yeah. And their concerns were taken to heart.
Yeah.
That's your question.
No, we're just having a discussion, right? But from that, it's interesting because I completely agree with you. Most people aren't heard in this world, and not by somebody that they believe on some level can help them.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And so there is a bit of authority happening there, where they go to somebody that they believe has more than they do, even though we're still a guide. We're not, they're the ones doing the healing. But it's still set up for that, and yet to be fully heard propels the healing process entirely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's funny because that's the thing where they, some people say, oh, well, it's just placebo because it didn't do anything. It's like, well, wait a minute here. It's like, why are we negating what is the most natural, basic thing that people need? It's like touch, it's like, touch is basic to humanity. There's tons of studies that show that if you just functionally give a baby vitamins and food and whatever, that they'll survive, but they don't thrive unless it's a real mom with real touch. This is in monkey world, but nonetheless, this is a truth that it's not the 3D stuff only that we're looking at. It's the connection.
Correct. It's the relationship. Of a lot of that healing. And I think, part of the reason that I think sometimes people come and are so grateful is that, the world of allopathic medicine, it's wonderful for acute situations, right? I mean, there's no question that there are times when it's very useful, but when a lot of it is predicated on you get 15 minutes with a provider, what can they possibly really learn about you in that time? And what can you be except anxious to feel like, am I making the most? Did I forget something? Instead of really being able to settle into the things that you need to share. And so I think that I agree with you completely. It's a hugely powerful part. Just the belief that there is the possibility of change is in itself powerful.
Because that's the underlining negative aspect of conventional medical practice in chronic disease, which is what we're dealing with all the time, right?
Yeah.
Basically, it's like, we're not going to cure you, you're not going to change, but we'll manage your symptoms. It will be easier for you, you know? And it's like, wow, that is such a low level goal.
Low bar, exactly. And that's, of course, one of the beauties of Ayurveda, because Ayurveda is all about, let's identify the root cause, because if we remove the root cause, then, oh boy, you know, things will really change. Yes, we might give you something to manage a symptom, but, you know, it's part of the education process, I think, too, in our work, or certainly in mine, is to make people understand that we've gotten used to this silver bullet idea. And a lot of us really, when we get right down to it, we want something fast and quick that's going to work. But truly, patience and faith is required to make long-lasting change. And there really isn't any way around that. And, you know, it's and then it's a question of how much does somebody want it. And obviously, I think the more extreme their circumstances. So for example, somebody in pain generally really wants to change that. Somebody who's in an extremely stressful situation that's impacting their health really wants to change that, but that's going to be part of it, is that will and willingness and readiness to make change has to be there too. You know, you can't give that to a client.
Yeah, no, but I do think that there has to be something that they can see. And usually, you know, I'll tell people, you know, I always say, book 3 appointments, you know, and by the second one, I'm expecting that they're going to go, huh, that's funny. My shoulder pain isn't gone, but strangely, I'm not having any digestive problems, you know, and it's I'm sleeping better. And it's like, oh, you know, so how relevant do you think that is to the totality? It's everything.
Yes, it's everything. I agree. And it's why, you know, as focusing on lifestyle issues becomes so hugely important, because just, I think, teaching people the importance of sleep, as you just said, and prioritizing sleep so that our systems have a chance to repair, and so that we get enough not to be emotionally labile and distracted the next day, can go such a long way towards making people feel different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that's the thing too. Often when people have been trained to think of their bodies as compartments, you know, which is a 15-minute thing, because you can't talk more than one symptom in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
You never see the whole, right? But it's also not understanding how the body works as a whole, you know, and I know in Ayurvedic medicine, there's a philosophy of understanding, as there is in homeopathy as well, which really explains how the body heals and the stages of this. And to think that, you know, these ancient, and Ayurvedic is even more ancient, you know, modalities really understood what I believe more and more people are coming to realize is needed. Because even if you get a quick fix and you take your gallbladder out, great. now you're going to have another problem to deal with.
Exactly. Things are there for a reason.
Exactly. Otherwise, we have a problem solution, which is what we're seeing, in great evidence in the last 2 years, It's like,
or as I like to say, yes, you can replace some of your body parts, but do you really want to do that? Because, really, if you're having problems with your knees or your hips, chances are it really relates to the way that you stand and move and your habitual ways of holding yourself. And you might replace that body part, but if you don't change the larger picture, your new body part might not last you the way you're hoping it will. So let's change, again, it gets to the root cause. Let's deal with the root cause and then see what happens to the way you feel. Yeah.
So we've got like a minute left. Any
that was fast.
Yeah, that was fast. Any last comments you'd like to make?
Oh, I just would say that I invite everybody to just think about, what's holding you back? What holds you back from living the life that you want to live? And then to have the courage and the faith to examine what it is. And for most of us, it's really our thought patterns, right? It's that negativity that you alluded to before, and learning to see how we sabotage ourselves with the way that we think, the way that we judge, the way that we're critical, and cultivating more compassion and kindness and empathy for ourselves and for others can go a long way to helping you change.
Well, thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome, Manon. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Manon Bolliger. Continue your healing journey by visiting thehealerscafe.com and her website, and discover how to listen to your body and reboot for optimal health.